Hey everybody, Cole here with Classic Mini DIY, and on today's episode, we're not doing any mini stuff. We are working on my 2018 Tacoma and getting it ready for some overlanding trips. So, stay tuned. Today's episode is brought to you by you. That's right. Every single episode created on Classic Mini DIY is made with the help of our patrons and our long-term parts sponsor, 7 Mini Parts. If you want to see more mini stuff and more videos in the future, please consider supporting the channel on patreon.com/Classic Mini DIY, or by checking out some of my awesome merch like t-shirts, stickers, and all sorts of other really cool stuff at merch.classicminidiy.com. Alright, let's get back to the episode. Now, like I said, today's episode is a little bit different. We're working on my truck. I'm going to be showing you guys how to install a brand new overlanding roof rack or bed rack on my truck, and it's going to live right over the truck bed on the back. It's kind of a mid-rise roof rack, so it's going to be a little lower than the roof, and it's going to be holding the rooftop tent that my wife and I are going to use in our trip up to the north part of the East Coast. We're going to be visiting New Hampshire and Maine and a large portion of the national forest that is available to us here in the United States. So this was originally going to be a trip to Iceland, and we were going to be doing a van camping trip and sleeping in this van, a rental van in Iceland. We're going to drive all the way around the entire ring road. Unfortunately, U.S. citizens not able to travel outside of the U.S. right now for, reasons I'm sure all of you already know. And so what we're going to be doing is going remote here in the US, and we're going to be driving this truck about 900 miles north to White Mountain National Forest. Now, for those of you who aren't in the US, the National Forest System is a huge amount of national public use land that is reserved and preserved by our federal government and a federal agency called the U.S. Department of Agriculture National Forest Service. It's a mouthful. But what they do and what they allow is something called dispersed camping. So anywhere that is on these public lands, you have the ability to pull off of these forest service roads and take a truck, take yourself, take a tent, and post up anywhere for free. It's technically public land, and the way that they market it is that the land is yours as a U.S. citizen. It's part of what you have and you're entitled to use here in the U.S. And so if you travel out west, out towards the deserts and the big expanses of land in the kind of middle portion of the United States, those are managed by the Bureau of Land Management, and it's a very similar premise. Dispersed camping is allowed. Granted, there are some guidelines around the way you use this dispersed camping, but it's very reasonable. So we're going to take advantage of that since we can't travel outside the US right now. Now, with all of that said, it's time to put this bed rack over my truck bed. And as you guys can see here, I have a rolling cover that normally covers the truck bed when I don't have anything in it or I want to keep the truck bed dry. That, unfortunately, is going to have to come off, and we're going to take this stuff out of the box and get it installed. Now, as you guys know, I have my safety footwear on right now, and let's get rolling. And let's use a little bit of magic to get rid of this existing bedroll system. I don't think we need a video to show you guys how to get rid of that. All right, so that has been removed. And the rack that we're going to be installing today is made by a company called Hooke. That's H-O-O-K-E. And it's a Overland rack, so it's a little bit different looking than the probably traditional truck bed rack that you might have seen normally. The way that the normal racks work is that you might get from Thule or a company like that is they'll usually have two big cross beams, and those cross beams will usually be level with the top of the truck, and then you'll have two rigid top beams so that you can kind of extend stuff over the top level of your truck. They're extremely useful for people who are using their trucks for work, but in my case, mine is a little bit more tailored to kind of recreation and just everyday use. And so this rack is a little bit more structured rack, and it sits about half height behind the window here. So unfortunately, I will lose a little bit of visibility out the back window, but the benefit is that it's not quite as high up as the normal racks are, so your tent doesn't sit quite as high up either. It just makes all around it just sit a little bit nicer on the back of a truck. So without further ado, let's open up this box and see what we get inside. Now, I am not sure there is a single place on the planet that would describe the parts that came in this kit as anything but robust. Everything in this is very, very thick steel. It's powder coated with a nice black color, and it all feels just very, very robust. This should be a great addition for holding up the rooftop tent on the back of the truck. Now, one thing I want to say is that all of this hardware came in a single bag, and I have to say that was pretty frustrating. I just spent the last like 5-10 minutes or so organizing all of these bolts, and when I have to do an install or something like this, it is really nice for these things to be individually wrapped. I know I don't like using all that plastic, but I mean, it's a lot of hardware to have all in just one giant bag. So just a little piece of feedback there. Now, starting off, the first thing that you're going to be doing is putting together your main pieces that are going to be sitting on the truck bed as such, and your cross beams that are going to be going across. They have 3 of these cross beams with 6 of these mounting points, and they just go on using mounting bolts. There are 2 on each side. Pretty straightforward stuff. So let's get to that. Now, what you'll notice here is that I've already set the roof rack up here, and the reason I've done that is because this thing is really freaking heavy, and it's going to be a little bit easier for me by myself to go ahead and assemble the rest of the pieces here after it's already on my truck itself. One other thing is these bolts that were put in on the actual upward brackets here, those need to be left finger tight. These brackets need to be able to expand outward a little bit, and they can't do that when these are fully tightened. And then what you're going to do is get these brackets here and these brackets here. Now, the way that this works is these are going to go in between the 2 cross beams. So you're going to start with the one up in the front, space it out evenly, put the bolts in, and start this one here. Then this is going to go in between each beam on the top here. It goes perfectly in between each of the 2 cross beams. So like I said, start at the front and then work your way back, assembling this as you go. The only thing left to do at this point is to connect the braces in that actually hold this rack in place. Now, when you do this, you're going to pull the rack kind of away on these brackets right here, because we finger tightened these earlier so that there was a little bit of play in them. And this is going to allow this to fully expand into the bed. And we just want to make sure that the rack is centralized in between the actual channels on your bed. We're going to slide our tightening brackets in, which are pretty straightforward. They're just little tightening brackets. They have nuts welded into them, and these are going to slide down the channel and all the way to each side and on the back side of this rack. Now, unfortunately, I ran out of daylight last night, but I was able to get all of the nuts and bolts tightened down on this rack, so it is now fully installed. And fully installed for this rack means that all of the mounting points are connected, all of the cross beams are connected and tightened up, and it's ready for use now. Now, one of the really cool things about Hook Designs or Hook Off-Road is that they provide you with a lot of stuff that other rack companies don't provide you out of the box. So this rack is about 550 bucks right now on sale. I think normally it's around 800 bucks, but it does come with all of these pieces of mounting hardware for you to use on your setup, you know, right out of the box. So these are for things like rotopacks, and then you have some mounting brackets for things like a off-road jack and all sorts of other really cool stuff. They even have a bolt that bolts into this crossbeam, the holes right in the middle, which are threaded, and you can mount a tire, a spare tire right on top if you aren't going to put a rooftop tent like I am on this truck. So Let's take a second, take a look and see what this thing looks like on the truck. It looks really cool from my perspective. And then we'll start assembling our CVT tent and starting to put that together and get that up here as well. What we're going to be doing next is installing the crossbars that are going to be used to mount this rooftop tent to the rack that's behind me. Now, we did all the unboxing and everything of this outside of this video. It's just a lot of, cutting tape and stuff, so it's not that exciting. But CVT includes a ton of items with this kit. This is one of the CVT Mount Shasta tents. You're gonna have a good look at this once it's up on the truck, so don't worry, it's not gonna be just this big white panel the whole time. And I'll go over all the details about the tent at that time, but as I said, we have to get these mounting rails onto our tent here. Now, from what I saw on their video, you can actually mount this way or this way, but you'll see if you mount the rails this way, you're gonna have to do some cutting, and it's gonna depend on how you want how your roof rack is assembled and configured on your truck, or your car, or whatever you're installing this on. Now, in my case, this is the bottom, and it opens this way, so this is the hinge right over here, and I want my cross beams to be perpendicular to that because this is gonna open off the side of my truck. So my cross beams on the truck are gonna sit like this, and they're gonna mount into this rail. So you take your bolt, you feed it in behind the mattress right back here, and I've got the nut in my other hand here. We're gonna slide this under and through all of the holes here, just like that. You're gonna repeat that process on all of the bolt holes, and then we're gonna mount the rails directly to this. All right, and with those bolts in place, the next thing they're gonna do is take your rail here, just kind of set it in place like this. You are gonna have to let a nut slide down the rail here, and it's gonna fall down in here. Let me show you how that works. Now, to start off, we're only gonna do these finger tight, and then once they're in good shape and they're threaded in, then you're gonna come back through with your wrench that was provided in the kit, and you're gonna tighten these all the way down. Now, the last thing you'll do in order to get these rails in place and ready to roll is installing these self-tapping screws. Now, the kit indicates that there was some pre-drilled holes at the end of these rails that would normally get pre-drilled by CVT in this case, and then you drill in your self-tapping screw to mount this in and tighten it down here. These are additional security for these rails. They aren't holding any of the weight of the tent, but they are there to just help secure this in place if either of the bolts down there become loose at all. All right, so that's screwed in. Now we just repeat this process 3 more times. Now, for the next part, we're going to be actually lifting the tent up onto our roof rack. Now, depending on the way that you configured your cross beams and the way that you are configuring this on the roof, you're going to have to make a decision here. Now, the side that the tent is going to open up on is the one that you want the hinged side of your tent facing. So in my case, you'll see that right down here we have the ladder. And on the opposite side of the ladder, the side that is facing the truck, that is the hinged side. And I want that to open up on the driver's side of my truck. So we're gonna rotate this and lift it up and place it on the roof rack up here. Now, keep in mind that this is something that's pretty heavy, and it is definitely a team lifting exercise. You don't wanna do this by yourself. If you could do it by yourself, I would be thoroughly impressed. All right, so with the tent up there now, what I want to do is measure out and make sure that the tent is perfectly centralized. And I want it to be, I want a little bit of space in between the actual cab and the tent, so this can come back maybe a little bit, maybe it'll need to go forward some. The main thing though is I want the same space on the outside of this rail over to the edge of the rack here, and the outside of this rail over to the edge of the rack here. 6.75 freedom units, 5 freedom units. So it'll need to go that way a little bit. Now with that centralized, it means that we can go ahead and put these brackets on. And the brackets that come with it come with a certain length bolt here. And these bolts, they actually mention that they might not be thick enough depending on the type of rack you have. And in this case, this rack is a little bit thicker, so I had to run to the hardware store and pick up new bolts. The ones that come with it are stainless steel, so you're going to want to pick up a set of stainless steel bolts. This is going to prevent rust, and it's going to just look a lot nicer. And then they'll fit right down in these rail track units here. And then there's a locking nut, goes on the other side. And then you have these flat brackets. These are what clamp around the actual roof rack itself. So what we need to do is slide 2 of these into the middle portion of the actual tent itself, or rather the rails. So let's get under here, I'll show you what I'm talking about. Now you can see the rails here, and the easiest way to do this is to slide the bracket into the end of your rail and just kind of prop up the tent, lift it up a little bit, so that the bracket can slide farther through. And so you can see here, that's what the bracket looks like from the bottom side. This one's going to be for the front 2, so it's going to hang down here and clamp around the actual rack here. We're going to put one in the front as well. All right, so once you've got all of these brackets kind of set up here where you have the flat piece, your 2 nuts and the bolts hanging on here, the next thing that you're going to do is tighten everything up. Now, I mentioned a moment ago, make sure that the tent is centralized and where you want it, and then these just clamp down and hold the tent in place. Now you'll see I used an electric unit here to tighten these down. I would recommend coming back through and using a manual socket wrench to tighten these down the rest of the way. That's just to nip these up, and then you just want to make sure that they're nice and tight because it's holding on a pretty heavy tent on your truck. So now that we've got the rooftop tent connected to the back Overland rack on the truck, we decided to bring the truck out here somewhere a little bit more rural so you guys had a good idea of what it's like to actually install and open up this tent while you're out and about, maybe at a campground. All right, so to get started, the first thing that you're going to do is disconnect the 2 straps holding on the cover over the actual rooftop tent itself. So my lovely assistant removing my straps. There and there. Now make sure that you don't throw these straps over your cover because they will hit the other side of your vehicle. You're going to want to walk those over in a little bit more controlled way. All right, so once you've got the zipper undone, the next step is removing the cover itself. This just simply pulls up and over off of the tent and will hang down on the side that the hinge is located on. This is what's gonna allow the tent to open up. So we're gonna disconnect one here, and then there's one on the opposite side which will also disconnect, and then we'll move on to opening up the ladder. Now the next thing that we're gonna do here is disconnect the strap that's holding on the ladder here, and we're going to extend this out and out this direction here so that you can grab the ladder from the side that the tent is actually hinging and opening on. This is something that's really easy to do with a truck bed. You might find this to be a little bit difficult if you have like a big SUV and you can't reach up there really easily. So strap comes off, and then what I do is I just extend this out a little ways, just enough to where you can grab it on this side of the tent. Now, once you have the tent extended, the next thing that we're going to do here, and this is only applicable for the extended fly version of this tent or any of their tents, you have this beam that comes out. It gets stored underneath the mattress. but you'll have these little tabs here. These tabs actually hold this bracket in place. Now this is kind of how the bracket sits when the rainfly is over it. What you have to do is actually install this while it's under the rainfly already. You can't pull this over it, unfortunately, after it's already on here. So you feed this end up into the rainfly, and then you attach it to these mounting points right here. It's a pretty easy process, and I'll show you guys that, but we'll be inside the rainfly this time. Now once you've got this rounded beam in here for your rainfly, propping it open, you want to add a little bit of tension to it, and that's done with this cross beam. It goes from right above the actual tent opening here, and it goes down and connects to the rod underneath the rainfly here. Now the easiest way to do this is keep this end right here, your adjustment end, down outside of the tent, outside of the main tent body, and you're going to walk up here, and you're going to take this opening right here and put that into this bracket right here. Really, it's just the beam up here on the actual tent. Now, you're going to want to support this with your hand, and this can be a little finicky. There's only so much space here, but support this beam and then push it in until it clicks into place. Then you're going to step back down here a little bit, extend the beam out, and you're going to kind of start from the side here and walk it in and while you're pressing. Now this is still loose, and that is so that we can centralize it, add a little bit of tension, and then tighten it. And so now you have a much better surface here to repel the water, and it opens this up a little bit so you're not kind of like bumping your head every time you get in the tent. Now connecting up these windows is pretty simple. There's a small hole on the tent here, and these will slide in, and you'll feel it hit the back side of the frame. And then you're going to want this hook to be facing down, so it's pointing down, and simply extend your wire up here, bend it, and connect it into these holes, just like that. Now, depending on how you have your tent configured, you might run into an issue like we have here. This window right here is facing towards the cab of the truck, and if you have one of the lower mount like Overland racks or bed racks, so it's not the full height and it's not sitting up above your truck cab, you can run into some issues with these beams here that prop the window open. I think we're going to have to find some sort of custom solution here, but we do have the ability to prop open one side. We just can't do both of them due to the way that the cab interferes with this beam. So pop this open on one side, and we got my lovely wife in here. There she is. But we can't pop open this side, unfortunately. We'll figure something out though. All right, so walking up to the tent, you come up to the steps here, and you take a look up, and you climb right on up, and you can see this is my wife giving a good idea of what the size of the tent is with a single person in it. Now you can see here that there's a good bit of room for two people to lay next to each other, and a good bit of room above your head, and a ton of headroom for tall people like me. One of the cool things about this tent is the Stargazer windows that are above you. So this is going to give you the ability to look out the top of your tent and really see all the stars and all the awesome stuff above you, even if you are trying to protect yourself from the elements like bugs and other stuff that's out there, creepy crawlies. But on top of that, you have a bunch of small amenities too. So little pockets on the side for all of your millions of phones that you want to carry around with you. And then up at the top there, you've got small vents. Those are open all the time, and they help a ton with condensation. So this is going to help prevent the tent from getting kind of damp or moist while you're sleeping in it at night. Granted, you know, you're still probably going to run into that issue a little bit, but not too bad. Now, on top of that, you do have the 3 window accesses. So you have one on the side here. Yep. One behind you. Yep. And then one on the other side. This is the side that's facing our cab, so that one's not all the way open. Now the last thing that you'll notice is that this has a nice cushy mattress inside it. This actually comes from the Cascadia group who makes this tent. It's super, super cushy, and it's probably about, I don't know, maybe 2 inches, 1.5 inches thick. And you could supplement this if you wanted to add a little bit more cushion, but it's a really, really awesome amount of cushion just by itself. You also can usually shut the tent in with these sleeping bags, so you don't have to roll it up every single time. So once we are done, we can flip this up and then shut the tent right on top of it without having to fuss with rolling up the sleeping bags. Pretty cool stuff. You excited, Haley?
Yes.
Awesome. Me too. Now that's going to wrap up this episode of Classic Mini DIY, or I guess Toyota Tacoma DIY. I hope you found this stuff interesting. I am going to be doing a little bit more Tacoma off-roading, camping stuff here on the channel in the coming future. So stay tuned for more of this if you want to see more Tacoma stuff. Don't worry, I am going to be sticking with a lot of Classic Mini stuff here in the future too. Just want to spice things up a little bit and try some stuff, get out there and explore some of the wilderness we have here in the United States. So if you have any questions at all about this tent, about the rack, about the truck, anything like that, feel free to post those in the comment section below. And until I see you guys on the next episode, enjoy those minis and Tacomas and motor on.